When I remember in Birmingham, Alabama, when we were in that majestic struggle there, we would move out of the 16th Street Baptist Church day after day.
Sights and sounds of an era of America's history was given a closer look by students at Marquette University. They explored and reflected on where and how certain privileges of today were earned.
I was kind of expecting to feel much more uncomfortable than I did feel.
It was touching because you get to realize that, like, it really happened, rather than like saying it in books.
Directly across the street is Kelly Ingram Park. And sitting in the museum, looking across the street to the park in which the kids were sprayed at, I never knew it was like being there in the history just takes it to a whole nother level. Like, you can learn about it, you can read about it, you can hear about it, but actually being there takes your emotions, it pretty much skyrockets.
These young people, along with others, participated in a civil rights pilgrimage. They left the comfort zone of their campus and trekked through 3 states, Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia. In Memphis, Tennessee, they visited the Civil Rights Museum. In Birmingham, Alabama, the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. And the King Center and Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. Their critical thinking and feelings were put to the test. Daryl Todd Jr., coordinator for intercultural.
On the trailblazing, if you will, of our society. Because a lot of times we look back at the civil rights movement and we hear Dr. King or these people, and we think that they were older, as in 40s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, when a lot of the movement really came out of student ran initiatives. That was like one of the most touching parts about the trip, is realizing like the power that college students had back in that era, like how much they did, like they did the sit-ins, and just seeing the perseverance, the self-control. Because if I'm at a lunch counter and someone just starts, putting out cigarettes on my face and starts beating me up, and it was not a violent protest, so I don't think I would have been able to just sit back in the chair and just continue standing there without doing anything.
The students had a chance to interact with a group of seniors who were touring the museum in Memphis. The seniors spoke about a missing generation of history.
It seemed like they were in awe of just listening to the seasoned people of our community talk about the things that were happening. And it brought out a lot of things that they didn't know, or I didn't even know. As far as, because we always think of the South was the slave place, and, that's where all the segregation and things were going on. But the young ladies, or the senior ladies, were from the North, in New York and Detroit, and they said that many of the same things were going on up there as well, just not as broadcast. And, I guess I had an assumption that in the North, they were getting the education about their history, when in all actuality, according to those ladies, that they really weren't.
They really stressed how the education is the great equalizer, and how they knew that, 50, 60 years ago, and how they really truly believe that still today.
The knowledge of the movement and having them understand the purpose and the importance of the movement was not necessarily passed down to the next generation as effectively, and that's kind of they felt that may be causing, or that is causing, a lot of the problems going on with youth, like violence and drug use and all those things. So they felt like we just have to find a way to like reach one, teach one, as one of them said, and just try to grab them and try to show them, this is what our people went through not even that long ago. Like 50 years is not long ago at all in history.
There's a lot of information that's left out when you learn about it in the classroom in high school. So talking to them about why that information is missing and how we can kind of carry it on for generations to come and educate the students who are currently in school. They did kind of talk about how their generation kind of chose not to talk about it, and as a result they feel that it was kind of lost in the mix.
The knowledge that they passed down wasn't much, maybe because it's hurtful. Like, they don't really want to remember those things. It's hard to talk about those things. But I do, they stress the fact that we need to speak with elders in order to get a better history, in order to embrace our history, because, I'm an educated male, but I didn't know a lot of the stuff that I learned down there.
Colleen Rooney, student teaches at Mesmer High School, and sees firsthand the result of young people not knowing their history.
I see my students really struggle with that, that they don't know where they come from. And I know where I come from. You know, I know my heritage, and I see my African American students really struggling with their identity. And I think part of that is because they don't have that community, and they can't necessarily have a place to show that pride in their African American culture. So I guess that really surprised me. I didn't know how alive it was still down there. I mean, we're visiting the Jazz Museum, and we're going to institutes and visiting people just on the street, and it's so there. That community is so there.
Brandon Rule was moved by the children of the movement's perseverance.
But the thing that really surprised me was how strong the kids were. They were like, no, we know the dogs are out there, we know the hoses are out there, but that's not going to stop us. And that surprised me the most.
We've got some difficult days ahead.
And the watching of the entire Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s Memphis speech.
Because I've been to the mountaintop.
Yeah, we're going to make it to the promised land, but I may not be there with you. That's one of like the bigger quotes that he said. And they had to help him to a seat, like, because he was pretty much like in tears, and he couldn't really, he stumbled over to a seat. They had to help him to a seat because he knew his life was coming to an end soon. Like, he had more bomb threats at his house. He had a lot more homicide, like, notes. He couldn't ride on a couple of airplanes. So just learning more about what actually went on in, like, Dr. King's life, like, close to his death was crazy.
I may not get there with you.
Attending Dr. King's alma mater, Morehouse College's homecoming, magnified the trip's experience.
At Morehouse, I was just like blown away. It was a lot to take in. I feel like I never had taken myself outside my comfort zone before to realize what it feels like to be like the only white person in the football stands at a homecoming game. And it was really emotional when we would go through group reviews in the evening and to hear my black peers, you know, say to me, now you know what we feel like every single day at Marquette.
You see the movie Drumline, but it's really like that. The bands have fun, the dancers have fun, and it was our homecoming, so you know all the alumni was there. So after, like in the second half of the football game, no one really watched the game because all the Morehouse's like old band members and cheerleaders and you know drum majors, they were all just on the track doing all the same dance, and it was just funny. They were doing all the same dance, but there was like one of the people was like 50 years old, and then you have like 18-year-olds, so they know that same dance perfectly, no rehearsal. And just to see that, it was just great. And then the step show, you know, it was just great. You know, just a whole experience because we were from Marquette, and it's definitely a whole nother world. So, you know, I love that experience. I found 1,000 possible wives. I just had to go back and get them. You know, I didn't have the rings on me, so I couldn't.
The traces of an era. Trees with no bark because of water hoses used on marchers. A plaque for 4 children murdered during the movement. A tomb for a man taken too soon was what this civil rights pilgrimage was about. Each year as we move further from the movement, more history is lost.
As an educated person in society, they have an obligation to give back and shape society, but to also realize that what they can do at this moment is something that they should do, and that the future is depending on them, and they cannot wait until they are 30 or 40 to get things done, but to actually realize that they can be as integral as some of these figures were at the ages they are now.
I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man.